Buck, I want to mention this also going into the trans crazy mindset. I think it's important sometimes to understand the language and what is going on in the country right now. So in my home state of Tennessee, they have passed a bill that bans so-called gender-affirming care for anyone under the age of 18. And they've also said, hey, you're going to have to play on, the teams. If you're in high school, you're going to play on the athletic teams of your birth certificate. I believe Kentucky, literally yesterday, just passed basically the same bill. West Virginia just passed the bill. Utah, I know, recently did. Red states all over the country are saying, hey, you cannot get gender transition surgery or treatment if you are under the age of 18. I think that's eminently rational. Most of these states also, for instance, Buck, wouldn't allow you to get a tattoo. You can't vote. You can't even get a beer till you're 21. It doesn't seem crazy to me to say, hey, we're not going to allow your breast to be removed when you're 14 or 15 years old, right? You have to be an adult. The trans community, some parts of the trans community have decided that these laws are trans genocide. And some of you out there, I know you're like, this is all so crazy. Like, how do we follow it along? What's the logic? I think it's important to lay out the thought process here. The trans community believes that some people in the trans community, if you are not allowing them to become trans, switch from man to woman, woman to man, whatever it is, you are attempting to erase the trans community, and that is, in some of their minds, akin to genocide. If that is the belief, then they are being radicalized into the idea that you have to defend the trans worldview by any means necessary because there is a cultural genocide being perpetrated against the trans community. That's how some members of the trans community are describing these bans on treatments for people under 18 years old. I just think it's important, Buck, for our audience to because I don't think a lot of people even understand this. I'm trying to take you into their worldview and why it might lead to violence if you are willing to believe that, and you may already be somewhat mentally ill.
This is why, there have been people suspended on Twitter that Clay and I both know. Sean Davis, for example, the Federalist, a friend of ours, he was on Tucker, I think, last night or the night before talking about this, just for pointing out that there is a trans day of vengeance. That is what they are calling it, by the way, this weekend. And on the flyer, I believe there's some mention of stopping the trans genocide. This is a total fabrication. This is almost like a collective mental illness. I mean, this notion that there's a trans genocide is completely insane, truly, clinically insane. It is based on no factual data whatsoever, unless you start to understand what the narrative is, which is that if you have a woman who believes that she's a man, and you refuse to just go along with that in every sense, everything, sports, life, work, everything, you are erasing, that is the terminology that they use, that person. And therefore, that erasure constitutes an act of genocide, the mass elimination and slaughter of a people based upon an immutable characteristic. That is the left's rhetoric.
That's their idea, Buck. And if you are already maybe a little bit mentally unstable and you buy into that rhetoric of genocide, it may not be shocking that you would be willing to engage in acts of violence if you believe that your people, the trans community, is effectively being erased. I think that's a toxic idea, but it's one that maybe, unfortunately, quite a few trans people are willing to buy into.